All right. Welcome to the two-player podcast. I am doing something a little different today as it's just me, and I am going to talk about just one specific problem with last week's episode of Game of Thrones, Eastwatch. I've already written about the whole Winterfell storyline, so instead of that, I'm going to talk about something else, and let's take a look at that. In Sunday night's episode of Game of Thrones, Eastwatch, we were introduced to a plan to convince Cersei that the army of the dead was real. When Jon receives a raven from Bran Stark up in Winterfell that the Night King is marching on the castle Eastwatch by the sea, he tells Daenerys,
I need to go home.
You said you don't have enough men.
We'll fight with the men we have. Unless you'll join us.
And give the country to Cersei. As soon as I march away, she marches in.
As soon as Daenerys marches north to help Jon fight the army of the dead, Cersei will march in. And the problem here is that Daenerys and the show never really explains where exactly Cersei will march into. Will she march to Dragonstone? What would be the point? No one was at Dragonstone before Daenerys got there. It's not a fortification she needs strategically. Really, Daenerys holds none of Cersei's lands except for Casterly Rock, which she can't hold for very long one way or another. So if Daenerys goes north to fight the army of the dead, nothing actually happens. The stalemate continues. Cersei can't really attack the north either, considering it would be extremely difficult to march what remaining forces she has on Stark lands. So nobody actually explains during this scene what the issue would be if Cersei marched in. But let's continue.
Cersei thinks the army of the dead is nothing but a story, made up by wet nurses to frighten children. What if we prove her wrong?
What if we prove her wrong? That's Tyrion's premise, which leads to his plan. Here's the plan.
I don't think she'll come see the dead at my invitation. So bring the dead to her.
I thought that was what we were trying to avoid.
We don't have to bring the whole army. Only one soldier. Bring one of these things down to King's Landing and show her the truth.
So this is the plan. And nobody actually questions the plan. They ask if it's possible, and Tyrion says all we need is one. If we bring one undead Wight to King's Landing to show Cersei, she will then believe that the army of the dead is real. At this point, no one bothers to ask what this will actually achieve, nor does anyone ask whether Cersei will care about whether the army of the dead is real. And even if she is converted into believing in the White Walkers and the army of the dead, why would Cersei care? She'll just use it to benefit the Lannisters. After all, it's the North that's going to face the brunt of an army of the dead attack. It's Jon Snow and the Starks. And possibly Daenerys.
Anything you bring back will be useless unless Cersei grants us an audience and is somehow convinced not to murder us the moment we set foot in the capital.
And even here, when Varys brings up a really good point that Cersei might just betray them and kill them all that anyone can seem to focus on is the whole granting of an audience part. And even that seems like a bit of a crazy stretch.
The only person she listens to is Jaime. He might listen to me.
Notice how Tyrion only focuses on Jaime and him listening. They don't focus on Cersei planning some terrible murderous betrayal or just not caring at all, even if she does believe. And then it goes on to planning how they're going to get Tyrion in to talk to Jaime.
And how would you get into King's Landing?
I can smuggle you in. But if the gold cloaks were to recognize you, I'm warning you, I'm not a fighter.
But it'll all be for nothing if we don't have one of these dead men.
Let's see how this conversation goes. Davos volunteers to smuggle Tyrion in. Then Daenerys says, well, it'll all be for nothing if we don't have a dead man to show Cersei. But no one actually says, wait a minute. Cersei won't care. She'll set up a trap. We all know Cersei. Tyrion knows Cersei. And Jaime be damned, Cersei isn't going to be convinced, even if she believes she's going to think of only Cersei. Which makes the whole plan ludicrous. But that doesn't matter. Let's not worry about whether any of this makes sense. Let's just cut to Jorah volunteering his sword for his totally platonic friend, Dany.
With the Queen's permission, I'll go north and take one.
And then, of course, Jon volunteers because, he can't let Jorah just one-up him in front of Daenerys Targaryen. And then there's some discussion. I mean, there's some, like, weighing of the pros and cons of Jon doing this.
You can't lead a raid beyond the wall. You're not in the Night's Watch anymore. You're king in the north.
I'm the only one here who's fought them. I'm the only one here who knows them.
But of course, it's not really an argument that makes sense. It's not about whether or not they should do this in the first place. They don't bring up maybe that a dragon flying over the wall might make more sense than sending Jon and Jorah on a ship all the way up to the wall, and then they got to go past the wall, and you get the picture. And then, Daenerys pipes in again.
I haven't given you permission to leave.
And Jon fires back.
With respect, Your Grace, I don't need your permission. I am a king.
And then Jon gives a passionate speech about trusting strangers, how he put his faith in Daenerys, and how she should put her faith in him. But at no point does anyone raise a question about the merits of the plan itself. I mean, let's lay this out real briefly. This requires Tyrion and Davos to get into King's Landing without being captured and killed. That alone is a suicide mission. Even though Davos is a great smuggler and Tyrion can meet with his brother, there's no assurance that either will make it out alive. And at least Tyrion is an incredibly valuable member of Daenerys' inner circle, and Davos is a valuable member of Jon's. So 2 of our most trusted advisors are going off to an almost certain death in order to have a pre-meeting meeting with Jaime Lannister. Meanwhile, Jon Snow and Jorah Mormont, along with whoever else they can bring, have to go up north beyond the wall to capture a Wight. And the Wights, if you haven't noticed, are traveling in a very large army of dead people, led by powerful magical White Walkers. How on earth do they plan to capture this Wight in the first place, then bring it all the way back? At no point does anyone say, maybe we should bring a dragon along. That might actually even the odds a little bit and shorten travel times. Not that travel times really matter in Game of Thrones anymore. And finally, all of this hinges on Cersei. On Cersei believing them, and then on Cersei doing something about it. On Cersei caring at all about an army of the dead threatening the North, her enemies. Nor does anyone question whether this will do any good, even if she did believe and act in good faith. What difference would it make? Cersei isn't going to march on the North. She isn't going to take Dragonstone. They don't even need Dragonstone. They don't even need Casterly Rock. Dany gives up nothing, no strategic advantage to Cersei except for time. And I guess time does matter, but even if they sign an armistice, that still gives Cersei time. It gives her time to hire mercenaries. It gives her time to devise plans. It gives her the only thing that she really needs. So one way or the other, this plan doesn't do any good for anybody, and it just puts a bunch of people's lives at risk. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm looking forward to next week's episode. I think it's going to be really exciting. I think we're going to get to see some of our favorite rogues and ne'er-do-wells and warriors go up north and have a crazy adventure against the Night King, and I'm pretty sure some people are going to die. But I just wish they were going to die for a good plan, for a sensible plan. I wish they weren't being rushed off to their doom to do something this pointless and stupid. So that's my take on the very bad, no good, awful, terrible plan that Tyrion came up with and no one argued against, and they didn't even bother to figure out if there was some other way. Or maybe it's my take on the writers of this show right now just kind of coming up with pretty lazy ideas. And they could be coming up with stuff that's so much better. I mean, there are other reasons that Jon could choose to go north. Maybe Sam found out some information about the Children of the Forest. Some weapon or ability or magic that can help them in their fight against the Long Night and the Night King. And maybe that's why he has to go north. Rather than this. I don't know. I'm going to stop griping now. As always, thanks for listening. Peace.